All right, let's talk to Michael. He joins us on the CarX Tire and Auto Hotline. Michael, what did you think of the Bears game this weekend? Did you like what you saw?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, relatively speaking, I thought they made adjustments / improvements over the previous week and stuff that we were critical of. And just talking to Jeff Saturday, I was asking him, why is it that one of the primary ways of defeating defensive pressure on the quarterback over the decades has been a screen pass? And no franchise probably threw better screen passes than the Bears did to Walter Payton all those years. And he said he doesn't get it either. He doesn't understand why coaches and offenses aren't using that more. He talked about his own team and using Edgerrin James in that way. And I was glad to see the Bears do that. And just do it. You penalize people for bringing that kind of pressure. You make them pay. And I was glad to see him do that very specifically. I know the defense had a couple moments they'd like to have back, but that defense is right there as the best defense in the league. And with the best 2 or 3, I mean, the Vikings are there as well. So, yeah. Caleb gets a little better every week. Seems like they're in sync a little bit more every week. The special teams does stuff every week. I mean, my goodness, the punter. I don't want to hear anybody else second guess why he was chosen in the 4th round. He averaged 55 yards a punt.
What did he average the first 3 games?
And he's averaging, 50 for the season so far? Come on now. Come on. This kid he's a weapon. He's part of the defense. He pushes your field position back and is an asset. And so, I mean, I don't want to get carried away, but I like.
Sounds like you like a good punter conversation, Michael.
Well, you know what? Come on. I told you guys whenever we did the first discussion we had after the draft, I told you I loved Troy Taylor. I told you I loved him because I saw him punt for Iowa, sitting there in Wrigley Field, and I'm giddy that we got him. So I was very excited about that.
I'm going to put Michael on hold too. Because this is the second week in a row that we've had the delay. Like we're talking to him like he's like we're NASA and he's on the space shuttle.
I don't think there's a delay with that one. I don't think there's any delay between NASA and the space shuttle. And that could cause some issues.
I forgot all about it. And then when at first, I didn't think he was ready to go. When I first asked my question, I'm like,
I thought you just didn't like your question.
That delay. I'm like, I forgot all about it. I don't know what's been going on.
I don't know either.
I think he's in D.C. too. And I do want to talk to him about Derrick Rose. And I know he's on the retirement. I think Taj Gibson was saying that he's cried for several days about Derrick's retirement. That Taj is now on the on the Charlotte Hornets. And today or yesterday was, I forget which day, I saw it on Twitter, it was their media day, and he said that Taj said that he's cried for the last couple of days over Derrick retiring, like they were that close.
Well, I mean, he's emotional because of the great career that Derrick had and the impact he had on the city and that stuff, right? Not that Derrick is no longer going to be in the league because he wasn't.
I think it's all of it. I think it's because of what he had to fight through, what he had to do at the end of his career to stay healthy. Michael, as we transition from the Bears and punter talk, I know you were very close and we're a huge fan of Derrick Rose and will always be.
Yep.
And he retired in the past week. And the Bulls, a matter of fact, today announced a day in January is already going to be Derrick Rose Day. And they didn't say whether or not this is going to be a jersey retirement day, but it will happen against the Knicks, which is perfect because Tibbs will be back in the building too.
Good.
So what were your thoughts on this whole story?
He's had it's an emotional issue for me because Derrick Rose, hell, I grew up where he grew up. Out of my front door of my home, out of the front window of my house, I could see Simeon High School. And as I said this morning on XM Radio, I was doing the show, and I was talking about how all the great names of people and great athletes that I have idolized in my life, from Sayers and Peyton and Banks and Williams and on down through the years, Michael, they except for Dick Butkus, they weren't from Chicago. Derrick Rose is us. Derrick Rose is from us. He's of us. And that introduction and from Chicago, that meant something to people. And when he got hurt, man, that's as down as I've seen the town in my adult life. I was 7 when, no, I guess I was like 8 or 9 when Sayers got hurt the first time. And I don't remember it clearly, and I was a little kid, and it hurt, but as a little kid hurt. This was hurting as an adult hurt. I remember talking to Doug Collins about it. Doug Collins was coaching against the Bulls, and it devastated him.
Yes.
Because he knows what it means to the fan base to have the Bulls, and he knew what Derrick Rose meant to the fan base being a Chicago kid. And the fact that Derrick could then play 15 years, he could play 12 more years after that. He wasn't going to be the Derrick Rose that we knew any longer, like Gale Sayers wasn't going to be the Sayers that we knew. But he hung in there. He made contributions. He was a valuable man. And you didn't hear any, you didn't hear people say, I never heard anybody say anything even mildly critical of Derrick Rose, the person or the teammate, in all those years. And I it had to hurt because he knew what he could be. We all knew what he could be. Brian Scalabrine, whose radio show I just referred to, he and Frank Isola, I talked to them this morning, and Scalabrine said that he was very careful about this. He said that Derrick Rose was probably the most talented, either as talented or more talented than anybody he played with or against in all those years in the league. And at the end, he was in Chicago when he got to see him and practice with him and all that stuff at the end of Scalabrine's career. And that's just interesting. He played with Kevin Garnett. He played with, probably Ray Allen, and played with some people in the Hall of Fame. And Derrick was thought of that way by his peers and adored in a way by Chicagoans that is different than other people that we admired. It's just different.
I was going to ask you, Mike, is he the most beloved Chicago athlete in the last several decades, despite not winning a title?
You know what? I'd have to. Yeah, because so many times other people who may start out that way, they went on to play elsewhere, and they, like Isaiah Thomas. I mean, Isaiah Thomas won titles and is in the Hall of Fame, but he was playing for a hated enemy, a sworn enemy in Detroit, and all the history there. That because of that, I mean, if Isaiah had been chosen by the Bulls and played in Chicago, there wouldn't have been any of that. But he was somewhere else, in a rival city, and so was Dwayne Wade, who was more beloved, I think, just because of the way sort of things played out. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I don't know that there's been anybody in football, Donovan McNabb, but played for a conference rival in Philadelphia, and never really had any pitched battles with the Bears. I don't think there's any dislike there. But yeah, there's some Chicago athletes that have been, and people could take a step back and say, I love this person, but then the relationship didn't continue at the level that Derrick Rose's did, and the hope that he gave the franchise and the city before the injury. And so, yeah, man, somebody would have to say to me, hey, wait a minute, because the people who led championship efforts were not from the city. Chris Bryant, Rizzo, that whole crew, Arrieta, nobody was from the city. Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taylor, not from Chicago. So I got to think, yeah.
And Michael, because of that, my answer probably throughout the years has changed. Probably if you would have asked me 5 years ago, should Derrick Rose's number be retired, it wouldn't have been as definitive. I 100% say now it absolutely positively should be retired. I don't think they should wait. And it's because it's twofold. It's because what you said about the talent, and the talent was astronomical. Like you said, as talented as anybody, like Scalabrine said, but what he meant to so many in a different type of way, where he represented that South Side. He represented many people who couldn't do it, but he showed them a path on how everyone could do it. And that pressure too, Michael, like, no Bulls team was really that great. They had a couple of good teams with Ben Gordon and Kirk Heinrich and Luol Deng. They upset Miami one year in the first round, but still, that this was our first star Bulls player since Michael. He was drafted number 1. all the pressure of playing in your hometown, playing sort of in the shadow of the Jordan statue. And then he lived up to everything and then some.
Handled it so well.
Yes.
You know, and took pride in it and understood it. And it was infectious. I remember I told the story, and I probably told it to you guys in the studio. So one night, Miami's in town, and I'm there at the United Center and talking to Dwayne Wade after the game. And we're just talking about all kinds of just basketball stuff, right? And so Dwayne says, "Hey, have you seen Derrick Rose play yet?" And I said, "No, I mean, I've seen clips, but I haven't really seen him play yet." And Dwayne says, "You whatever you're doing tomorrow, cancel that. Go to Simeon to see Derrick Rose play." And I go, "He's that good?" And Wade says, "He's better than me at this stage." And I go, "Stop. Just stop now. You've gone too far." Wade says, "Shut up. Listen to me. You got to see this kid play." And I remember that. I remember the seriousness on Dwayne's face, but more than the seriousness, the pride that Dwayne Wade had in Derrick Rose coming from where we come from. That's powerful stuff. And Derrick always represented that, man. He again, Silvy, you said it perfectly. He understood the pressure that came with it. Either he could ignore it or he understood it. Either way, man, you know, it was an important chapter. It was not the happy ending that we wanted, but it's an important chapter in the history of Chicago and sports. And if you ask me, I have said recently, if you do the sort of Illinois Hall, the Mount Rushmore of Chicago, of basketball in Illinois, the Mount Rushmore basketball, it's going to be in chronological order for me: Mikan, Isaiah, Dwayne Wade, and I've been always trying to figure out who the fourth person is. And I'd be happy if it was Mike Krzyzewski, by the way, who people don't realize often enough is a Chicagoan, and a proud one. But I'm going to say, if we're talking about players, then I'm putting that fourth spot goes to Derrick Rose, given that he wanted Simeon, he gets to the Final Four, gets to the final game in college, played so admirably, won an MVP. How many Bulls players have ever won MVP? One. Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Yes,
and Derrick Rose.
exactly. I want to play you something from Bulls Media Day yesterday. There are people with different takes on this. I have not shared the way I think. I don't know what you think. I don't know what Waddle thinks. I don't know if Waddle's heard this yet. Zach Lavine goes to the podium yesterday, looking all jacked too, by the way. I heard that. Got muscular. And instead of opening it up for questions, I think you may hear it in here, he takes control and he says he wants to say something to everyone at the beginning. And he sort of, like he does on the court, just kind of hog the ball. No, I'm kidding. But he does take the ball here, and then he talks for a while, and he explains himself. And I want to know what you guys think of this. This was it's lengthy, but it's all good. So take a listen to this, and then I want both of you guys to react to what you hear from Zach Lavine at the microphone at Media Day.
I want to thank everybody. Obviously, I'm very happy to be back here. Extremely happy to be back. You know, in training camp, it's been a long summer. Fully healthy, but you know, I'm excited to come back here, compete. I've had a lot of learning to do and watched a lot of film, so I'm excited to be able to play offensively, defensively, whatever role they put me in. I'm excited for that. It's a you know, when you go through a long off season like I have, you get to learn a lot about yourself and the company you keep. I have an extremely well support system, and I think that with everything that I learned, there's times you need to speak and there's times that you don't. I had probably how long until I talked to you guys? I was talking to you guys in February of last year. Whenever there's something that needs to be said, it'll come from Zach Lavine or my representation. You know, there's a lot of thoughts and rumors, opinions about me, about the organization. So just know whenever it needs to come from me or them, you'll know it'll be from them. I think Rich talked one time, and this is my first talk time to you, so everything else you can take with a grain of salt, with false narratives or whatever it may be. I think going forward, the best way to handle, you know, a lot of this stuff is I'm in a great situation, a great headspace. I'm fully healthy right now, which I don't take for granted. Anything negative that will try to pin me, the organization, rumors, drama, whatever it is, I leave that in the past. I'm focusing a lot on this camp right now, going forward on, this team and helping, learning, and just having a good time. I think that's something that's not talked about enough is, when you have good energy, you only give into that. I don't want to keep talking about the past or anything because there's a lot of things I can't speak on, but there's no reason to. I had a conversation when I first committed to the Bulls and signed my deal here with Michael, with Jerry, AK, the front office, with the commitment that they gave me, the respect they gave me. I'm going to continue to give them that same respect, but not just the way I play, but with my professionalism. And that won't waver. That's something I stand on. So, anything going forward, I think that's, how I'm going to answer it. I'm looking to, get any questions that you guys want, but, I'm excited for this camp. I'm excited for this year. There's a lot of things that we can do moving forward. So
that was his statement. What did you think of him taking control of that and what he had to say, Michael?
A+, ovation, not a golf clap, ovation. Now, it doesn't mean much if you come out and then betray it by, February. It doesn't mean anything. But you got to come out and sort of, you set the bar yourself and now clear it. And I thought that was like great. There's no other reaction to have. Now, you can be skeptical. It's fair to be skeptical given sort of what has happened with him in the past. But he sort of addressed that without going into detail. He doesn't need to. I'm glad he mentioned Michael and Jerry Reinsdorf and the amount of money they agreed to pay him. Good. I mean, we know Zach Lavine. Zach Lavine has immense talent. I mean, he's an all NBA talent. And at one point, how could you separate? I thought they were like twin players, he and Devin Booker. Devin Booker has really separated himself from Zach Lavine.
Yes.
They're not twins, not based on results. And over the last, 3 to 4 seasons. So if Zach Lavine can be that and match that, why wouldn't he be able to, and why wouldn't you want it if you're the Bulls? And I don't know that is going to make the difference in where they finish in the standings. I mean, there's 5 teams to me that the Bulls have no chance of catching. And then there's probably a couple more, really. But they have no chance of catching Boston, New York, Philly, the Pacers, and Milwaukee. None. But after that, Orlando looks like they've sort of separated themselves too. But nonetheless, and Cleveland. Yeah. So maybe there's, maybe they can't catch any of them. But they've got some talented players. Zach Lavine is the most talented of those players. I mean, he's the best player. But if he can make good on what he just said at Media Day, when was that? Yesterday or today?
Yesterday.
When was that?
That was yesterday.
If he can make good on that and hold himself to that, that's all I'd ask, really, for me.
I felt like he was drifting into being defiant or defensive at times, but he stopped himself, which I thought was a good thing.
Yeah, he brought himself back.
So, it sounds like he's got it. From my perspective, it sounds like he's got a really good attitude. It sounds like he's got a really good approach about things. But at the end of the day, this comes down to whether or not he can be a winning player and that he can help them win games.
Yep.
And if his performance, makes that statement, then fantastic. At this particular time before the ball goes in the air, even for the start of training camp, it's all just words, but
it's lip service until we see it. Like Michael said,
but we got to see it.
But I'm glad he didn't go the defensive or defiant route.
Right. Because and I agree with what you guys are saying. One of my friends said to me, "Oh, this is arrogance. I don't like this take." And I go, I didn't think it was bad.
I didn't either.
And the only thing
I don't think it's arrogant at all.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like was when he said, "Look, if you didn't hear it from Rich, if you didn't hear it from me, it's not true." We all know that Zach didn't want to be here last year, and we all knew the Bulls were trying to trade him.
Well, you know what else? He says he's glad to be here. Being in Detroit right now would not be a great alternative.
Right. That's
so. If that drove him to being more appreciative, that's fine too.
Right.
If the reality is a professional sport, and being somewhere where you have no chance, at least to start this camp, drive you to realization, that's okay. So I like what I heard, but again, he set the bar now, and that's good, but then clear it. Then meet it.
Michael, and I thought what he was out to do was be as ultra professional as possible and to say, here I worked really hard in the offseason. I did some inward thinking on how I could improve, on how I could be a professional going back to the Bulls. And I'm going to do my best to up my value so I can get traded and then get the hell out of here.
Well, you can do it that way. Yes, you can do it that way.
I think that's the motivation for both teams, for both sides.
But that doesn't have to be the motivation. That can certainly be a sidebar. But suppose they get to the kind of place where they were, at the beginning of that year, 4 seasons ago now, where the pieces fit and they outperform what the expectations have been and are. And
no chance.
You get a
know
healthy,
that.
Well, I'm not going to say no chance because I see it every year. The Minnesota Vikings lost their quarterback, and they're 4-0 with a guy that you wouldn't have picked up at any red line stop. You wouldn't have picked him up and put him in your car and made him your third string quarterback in Sam Darnold. So no. I've been around sports too long and seen too many teams where that can happen in every sport. Am I predicting that for the Bulls? No, I'm not. Am I saying, though, that they have some interesting pieces, and suppose those pieces come together? Is it possible? Yeah. Is it unlikely? It's unlikely. If it comes together enough that actually, by the way, just look at the ball handling situation. So you got 3 guys now who really need the ball in their hands. You got Lonzo Ball, if he's back to where everybody says he appears to be. You've got Kobe White, who looked like one of the 2 most improved players in the league last year. You've got Josh Giddey, who averaged, 16, 7, and 7 at 20 years old or 19 years old. So, and you just traded an all-defensive player to get him. You got 3 guys who need the ball, not to mention Zach Lavine. So somebody is going to need to be traded, and they're not going to trade Josh Giddey. I mean, maybe they could. I don't see him being at 20 years old. 20, what is he? Is he 21 yet?
21.
I don't see them trading him. And so what has to happen? I don't see him trading Kobe White. I wouldn't. So what does that mean? Maybe Lonzo Ball is the odd guy out after a while if he proves healthy and a contender says, okay, here's a guy who's under 30 years old still, who we know can do a lot of stuff, can defend, can hit an open shot, can handle the ball. Maybe you start looking at that stuff later if the Bulls are 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, where we think they're going to be. But if they're not, let's see what happens.
Okay. Let me ask you really quick before we let you go. Pete Rose was the number 1 sports hero for Tom Waddle when he was growing up in Cincinnati.
Oh, wow. Of course he would be.
So what is your number 1 memory of Pete Rose or story?
Sadly, my number 1 memory is probably him, knocking Ray Fosse out at the plate in an All-Star game and kind of ruining Fosse's career. Fosse was like the best young catcher in baseball, and he never recovered after that collision at the plate in the All-Star game, whether that was 1970 or 71. I can't remember really. Seems like Billy Williams was on the end of that where he drove the winning run in, which was Rose. And that's my number 1 memory, which shouldn't be the case. But I know that Pete Rose might not have invented the head first sliding. Maybe he did, but he certainly popularized it. He played with a fury. He played with a recklessness and an abandon like a linebacker had crossed over to another sport. And his hair was always flying, and he was diving and elbowing and getting hit at the plate and sprinting to first base. All of those are memories I have of Rose playing for what is, I think, the greatest team of my lifetime, the Big Red Machine.
Amen.
Because all those guys are in the Hall of Fame except for Rose. So, it's all of that. It's all of those Reds years where they would come to Wrigley and I would go to Wrigley and buy a box seat because it was $8 and I had my paper route money. And I wanted to see Pete Rose and Johnny Bench and Tony Perez and Joe Morgan and Concepcion and Geronimo
Yep.
and Griffey. I wanted to see them play the Cubs, and I did. And Pete Rose, man, was a reason to buy a ticket. He's one of the greatest players. You cannot write the history of baseball and not include the story of Pete Rose.
And what about Mutombo?
Mutombo was about the most generous and joyous soul that I have ever met in my professional capacity. And I covered him at Georgetown. I've known him since he was a teenager, but I also got to know him as a grown man, a neighbor here in suburban DC. His niece Rachel plays plays basketball in Northwestern right now, and I saw her last week. And Dikembe was his spirit is what comes out. I mean, that's another guy you never hear anybody say anything bad about Dikembe Mutombo, no time ever. And he was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, so his contributions on the court were massive. But his spirit and his generosity and his humanitarian efforts, just in the healthcare field alone, what he tried to do in his native Africa, he's one of the remarkable people I've ever met in my life. And I'm so glad I got to know Dikembe over a period of 30 years. And I just can't believe, I don't want to believe that he's gone at 58 years old. There was so much more left in him. And if you didn't get to know Dikembe Mutombo, if all you saw was the laughter and the finger wag, that is who he was in his joyous moments, which seemed all the time. And I knew he was diagnosed with this. I was with him at a event at the Smithsonian here in Washington. And it just depressed the hell out of me to know that Dikembe had to take this on and fight this, and the end wasn't going to be good, wasn't going to be happy. And so that is really, at least, Pete Rose got to live a full life in his controversy, in his complexity. Dikembe Mutombo did not, and it really has put a damper on the week of a lot of people here in Washington, where we got to know him at the beginning of his journey.
Yeah. Well said, Michael. All the best to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, you guys. Talk soon.
There you go. There's Michael Wilbon. Really a good wide range of topics today, and it's good stuff there on Pete Rose and Dikembe Mutombo.